Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly fascinating concept. So, if you love wine or, a really good cup of coffee, you probably already know the word terroir. It's this idea that the specific environment where a plant grows completely dictates its shape, its flavor, and its entire chemical makeup. But what if we took that exact same concept and plunged it underwater? Well, let's dive right in. We're going to explore this groundbreaking 2026 study by Nasir and colleagues, which actually proves that marine terroir is very real, specifically when we're talking about sea grapes.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the rise of sea grapes, look at 3 Malaysian growing sites, see how environment changes shape, explore nutritional fingerprints, and finally wrap up with the future of aquaculture.
Section 1. The Rise of Sea Grapes.
Before we get into the microscopic details, we really need to understand the macro picture of the global seaweed industry. Just to put this in perspective, in 2020 alone, seaweed aquaculture crossed a staggering 35 million tons in annual yield. That is massive. It accounts for more than half of all marine aquaculture. But here's the wild part. Most of that global focus and the export money is tied up in brown and red seaweed. Green macroalgae, like our subject today, sea grapes, or color polentillifera if you want to get scientific, have been surprisingly under-researched. If you've ever had them, you know exactly why they're so valued in Southeast Asia. They have this incredible texture, literally popping in your mouth like a salty oceanic caviar. Plus, they're packed with health benefits. But scientifically, we are really just scratching the surface of their true potential.
Section 2. 3 Malaysian growing sites.
To actually understand marine terroir, Nasir's team couldn't just look at one location. They needed to test plants from vastly different marine vineyards. So samples were harvested from 3 completely distinct locations across Malaysia. Down in the south, you've got Port Dickson. Over in East Malaysia, there's Semporna. And up in the north, the island of Pulau Langkawi. Now, these aren't just random spots on a map. They represent entirely different worlds when it comes to water dynamics and ecosystems. To break that down a bit, Port Dickson is a semi-exposed coastal area dealing with active tourism. Semporna is this wild, mostly untouched coral reef ecosystem. So both of those are unpredictable, highly dynamic environments. On the complete opposite end of the spectrum, you have Pulau Langkawi, which is a highly controlled, cultivated aquaculture pond. The scientists wanted to know something pretty straightforward. If you grow the exact same species of sea grape in these vastly different conditions, what actually happens to the physical plant? Section 3. How environment changes shape. We're about to see that the ocean doesn't just nourish these plants, it literally sculpts them. If you look at the physical anatomy of the sea grape, you have these upright stems with the little grape-like bubbles on them. Those are called assimilators. And then down at the bottom, those stringy parts clinging to the surface, those are the rhizoids, and they act just like roots. The researchers meticulously measured these exact structures across all 3 sites.
And the crucial takeaway comes down to this one number. 94.40 millimeters. That is the towering height of the assimilators found in the Pulau Langkawi pond samples. They were more than double the height of the wild samples. No way, right? But it makes sense when you think about it. In a stable, cultivated pond, these sea grapes aren't fighting aggressive tides or searching desperately for nutrients. They have a remarkably cushy life. Because of that, they retain an incredible amount of moisture, over 96%. Which allows their tissues to elongate and grow surprisingly tall without breaking.
But life out in the wild, that is a completely different story. The sea grapes from Port Dickson and Semporna didn't grow nearly as tall, but they grew significantly longer roots, or rhizoids. In a wild environment with aggressive wave action, hydrodynamic stress, and shifting sands, a sea grape has to adapt if it wants to survive. It's basically hitting the gym, expending its biological energy to push its rhizoids deeper, securing a much stronger anchorage to the rock or sand. The environment is directly, physically dictating the morphology of the plant.
Section 4. Nutritional fingerprints and minerals.
So if the outside of the plant changes this drastically, what in the world is happening on the inside? To find out, the researchers used something called chemometric analysis. Simply put, this means feeding a massive amount of chemical data. We're talking proteins, fats, minerals, heavy metals, into statistical models to see if there are any hidden patterns. It's kind of like searching for a microscopic barcode that identifies exactly where a plant was grown based entirely on its chemistry.
And the undeniable proof of marine terroir lies right here in this principal component analysis, or PCA biplot. Now, don't worry about the complex math. Just notice how the specific samples group together. The samples from Port Dickson cluster completely separately from Pulau Langkawi, which cluster separately from Semporna. The statistical model separated them flawlessly. What this tells us is that each specific location leaves a totally unique, identifiable chemical signature on the sea grapes. Let's look at a practical example. Calcium. There is a massive spike for Port Dickson, 104 milligrams per 100 grams, compared to just 32 in Semporna and 26 in Langkawi. I mean, if you're looking to boost your bone health naturally, you would definitely want the Port Dickson harvest, for sure. The researchers point out that this isn't some random occurrence. It is a direct reflection of the mineral availability in that specific open coastal environment. The plant is literally absorbing what the local waters provide. So, summarizing these nutritional winners, Pulau Langkawi's stable pond conditions yield high moisture and magnesium, likely because of reduced water exchange where salts tend to accumulate. Port Dickson's semi-exposed coast produces sea grapes that are incredibly rich in calcium and protein. Meanwhile, Semporna's wild coral reef environment triggers a spike in carbohydrates, reflecting how the plant stores energy differently in that specific metabolic environment. The environment isn't just a home, it's the actual recipe.
Section 5. The future of aquaculture.
So why does all of this incredibly detailed science actually matter for the real world? Well, this is where Nasser 2026 lays out a truly bold strategic vision. If we know that environment drives nutrition, we can completely revolutionize how we farm the oceans. This data drives highly strategic site selection. Farmers don't just have to guess where to plant anymore, they can choose specific marine sites to cultivate targeted nutritional profiles. Think about it. If the global market needs high-calcium sea grapes for health supplements, you now know exactly where to grow them, in coastal regions like Port Dickson. Furthermore, this directly supports policies that aim to optimize production and ensure consistent, ecologically sound aquaculture development. It's an absolute game changer.
We've seen today that a sea grape is never just a sea grape. It is a biological record of the water it grew in, carrying a totally unique shape and nutritional payload forged by its specific home. As the seaweed industry continues to explode globally, understanding marine terroir isn't just a fun scientific curiosity. It is the future of our food security, which leaves us with a pretty fascinating question for the next time you see this superfood on a menu. Where will your sea grapes grow? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring the incredible science shaping our world.